The skills that make you great at what you do are not the same skills that make you great at building and scaling a business. And I think the real question is, who do I have to become to scale? There's an identity shift.
The most successful entrepreneurs on earth, their identity is more hooked into being an entrepreneur than it is to whatever they're selling.
When you make that decision to be a business owner and then you reach that stage where it's like, now I want more than that. The truth is, you basically just built yourself a job, but you got to ask yourself, are you okay with that?
If you really move into building an empire and reaching more people, you're not thinking about per hour rates. You're thinking about how much revenue can I generate?
You've got to think in outcomes and decisions. Once you start down that road, you're going to recognize what you're capable of building. With capability, all kinds of shit becomes possible. Welcome back to the Path to Mastery podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Lang, CEO and co-founder of Empire Partners, alongside my co-founder and co-host, Brook Bishop. What's up, dude?
What's up?
Another episode, and this is going to be one in particular that I think is probably going to really open people's minds up. We're talking about scaling today, and we often get the question, how do I scale, or how do I know if I can scale? And I just want to kind of start things off by being clear. You're asking the wrong question, because here's the deal. You got to go back a peg and just remember something, which is that the skills that make you great at what you do are not the same skills that make you great at building and scaling a business. And so the question, how do I scale, is a bit off base. And in my mind, and I want to hear what you think about this, but I think it comes back to identity. And I think the real question is, who do I have to become to scale? Because there's an identity shift. We laid this out when we did all of the 4 Path to Mastery episodes, which, by the way, if you haven't caught those, we broke down our Path to Mastery framework in 4 different episodes where we did every single phase by itself. And we also talked about the identity shifts that you got to make. But, what I think this interesting question that came up for me as I was planning this episode, Brooke, which is, who are you when you're not the one doing the work?
It's a really good question, dude. And it's interesting because, as you mentioned, like so many people who go into the entrepreneurial landscape that want to have their own business, they usually come from being really successful in a job, right? And so it's like, oh, I kicked ass in my job, therefore I'm going to go kick ass as an entrepreneur. And the reality is, especially in our space and in this niche marketplace, every practitioner that I've ever met who can't take a 2-week vacation in their business, it's usually because it's the same issue that's playing into it, right? Like there's pieces that are falling apart. We become so indispensable that we become handcuffed. We become locked in to the business that we're in. And I'll be candid with it, there's an element of certainty and significance that we get when we hang on and we think that we have to do everything, or we think we have to be everyone to everybody.
Yeah. I think that's so true. And I also think that it's interesting because there's 2 sides. Well, I mean, probably more than 2, but two key sides with the people that we work with the most, which is either you came from the job, right? And you're figuring that piece of it out, or you've been an elite practitioner. You've been a solo practitioner who is elite at your craft. You've gotten really, really good at what you do. But what happens when you're not the one doing the work? And there's literally we think about this a lot. Like a good example is what happens with moms, right? When their kids finally leave the house, they built this identity as I'm this mom and I'm taking care of everybody, and then the kids leave the house, and it's really common for them to just have a like, oh shit moment, or in some cases like an oh shit several years of like, fuck, who am I now? And I think it's interesting because I think a lot of times when it's one of the sneaky things. People, I think it gets disguised a bit as like, oh, I don't know who to hire, or I don't know how to hire, or whatever. But in reality, a lot of people finally bring in that team member or a couple of team members or God forbid somebody to actually train on what they do, and then they freeze up, not because of logistics, but because of identity.
Well, do the identity, I mean, we used to say this all the time, you know, the strongest force in the universe is our need to be consistent with our identity. And if we're not, we call that schizophrenic, right? So, so the reality is, if we're not being consistent and congruent with our identity, then there's something significantly wrong, and that's a whole different dialogue. But the reality is, if we approach growing and building a business as an employee, as the mindset and identity of an employee, and again, for most people, it's unconscious. Most people are like, oh, I'm going into business on my own. I'm an entrepreneur now. And they really believe I'm an entrepreneur now, but they haven't built entrepreneurial muscles. And I think that's a key distinction when we get in under the hood on this. It's like, well, what if you really look at the most successful entrepreneurs on earth, they all have a very similar dynamic when it comes to how they approach life, right? Like their identity is more hooked into being an entrepreneur than it is to whatever the widget or whatever it is, the thing that they're selling.
That's so true. And I think that the other piece is that when you make that decision, to be a business owner, to be an entrepreneur, to go out on your own, or you make that decision, to really hone your craft, and I'm going to get elite at something. And then you reach that stage where it's like, oh yeah, but now I want more than that. Well, the truth is, you basically just built, we talked about this in the Path to Mastery episodes, but you basically built yourself a job. If you're really, really good at what you do, I don't care if you're an attorney or you are a therapist or you're a personal trainer or you're a coach of some kind or whatever, you built yourself a job. Your job has your name on the door. You set your own hours. And here's the deal. You can't fire the boss, but it's still a job. And the question is, here's the interesting one. And by the way, I'm not saying there's a right or wrong answer, but you got to ask yourself, are you okay with that? And if the answer is no, just keep listening, because we're going to kind of lay out a pathway to think about this differently so that you can have more if you want it. If you don't, then, so be it. A lot of people are totally okay with the fact that they just, built themselves a job and at least it's theirs, and there is that.
Yeah. I mean, the reality is your job isn't actually to do the work. In the beginning, I would say that it is, right?
Yeah,
when you're launching your business and you're getting it set up, heck yeah, your job is to do the work. But that shouldn't be the forever home that you live in. Your job is to actually own the outcome.
Yes.
And make sure that things get executed, and make sure that you take it to another level, and make sure you reach more people, make sure that you add more impact.
That's it absolutely is. And that's a major shift too, by the way, because think about this sequentially. I mean, when we first decide that we want to do something like this, we've got to, hopefully you realize you've got to be good enough at something. Yeah, I hope so. But we start in this place where it's okay. Oh, you know what? I gotta obsess over this. I gotta get really good at this, and then I'm doing. But then you kind of get to a point where if you want more than just the job that you built yourself, you've got to check in and go, okay, hold on a second. Now, if I do want more than that, what's the identity shift that I have to make, and how would that person show up? And what would that person do? Well, that person would probably go out and start finding some other people that can do some of the things that they shouldn't be doing. And you start to kind of whittle it down, right? I'm getting rid of my inbox. I'm getting rid of my calendar. I'm getting rid of some other things. But then there's also the item of the actual work itself. And here's the thing. I feel like there, and by the way, I'm gonna out you and I, because I think we still do this to a degree. I'm not going to lie. I'm going to be honest. I'm not fucking around. I'm going to be honest. But I think that I think we have a belief that there's this nobility in staying in delivery. There's the age old thing about, oh, nobody's going to do it as well as I do it. And so I can't let go, of these certain pieces. And here's the truth. It's going to hurt. And by the way, I'm saying this to both of you and I as well. Staying in delivery is not noble. It's not. It's avoidance. You're not protecting your clients. You're basically You're basically protecting yourself from the discomfort of becoming the next version of yourself as a business owner.
I want to let that one sink. That's a huge, huge sentiment. And I know for me, it's definitely tough because I mean, at the end of the day, I like doing the work, certain parts of it, right?
Same.
But it also, if we recognize that that's the bottleneck from getting to the next level, okay, so me doing the things I like to do is preventing us from reaching more people, or it's preventing us from having impact. And actually, that's an interesting thing to potentially explore. You know, I think you mentioned identity on this bad boy. How many people have we ever met that go, I want to be my own business owner because I'm making this company so much money, but if I was off on my own, I could be making more money and potentially working less.
Mm-hmm.
And so their driver is to make money, which is a very interesting piece. And obviously all of us, the mass majority of us who are working and are in business, yeah, we want to make money. But
Sure.
it's, especially in the coaching world or in the personal development world, if that's your driver, to your point, like you're still running a job because your focal point is make money, make money, make money.
Yep.
And most people are looking at going, how much can I make per hour? So by the way, for anyone who's listening, if you've gotten caught in that trap of here's how much I charge per session, that's a big indicator that you're playing this game of what do I get paid per hour? That's employee thinking, by the way. So from an identity standpoint, the moment we move into like, I'm going to build an empire. Ooh, see how I just made that little anchor right there?
You did. Oh, that was nice.
That was clever.
That's hot.
Maybe not. It's still early. I haven't had my coffee yet. Forgive me. But if you really move into building an empire and reaching more people, you're not thinking about per hour rates. You're thinking about how much revenue can I generate? How many people does that equate to? How do I get my margins dialed in? How can I build a team so I can leverage and get to more humans? So, yeah.
I want to, on that specifically, I want to ask you about something because I think there's actually a really great example. And now we're going to go sort of from 0 to 100 with this example, but I think it's polarizing, and so I want to use it here. How have you seen Tony Robbins do that? You've seen this up close in person with Tony. And I want you to think from like everything you know about Tony from the time that he's just out there doing his seminars after Jim Rohn, you know, mentors him and all of those things to today. Is Tony trying to fulfill on every area of his businesses?
Tony is doing everything he can to fulfill on as little as humanly possible. So it's interesting because I got to see from the space when I first came into Tony's world. So this was back in 2005. So keep in mind, for the mass majority of people who are listening, Tony had already been in business for like 25 years at that point. Okay. So it was pretty substantial. And at that point, and even still today, but he was the biggest name in the personal development world. And it was wild because back then it was all go on growing our core business. Now, the only other business I think he had then, he had his own media company so that could support with all the AV and delivery of things. And he had a nonprofit that was hooked into everything. So that way the work he was doing in the for-profit space had bigger impact in the nonprofit space. Okay. So that was the expansion of his business portfolio. Between then and now he is owner of over 120 companies. Like you can't do 10% of anything when you have 120 companies. There's not enough percentage points to go around. So you have to see yourself leveraged in a completely different way. Mm-hmm. And again, his impact today compared to then is thousands upon thousands of further in his reach and his impact, as well as in his earnings too. Yeah. So it's a different animal.
Well, that's what you just said, something really important. Some people will listen to that and go, "Oh my God, I don't want 120 companies. I don't want that kind of hassle. I can't identify with that." Let me go back to your statement earlier, which is, what's your driver? Tony's driver is not money at this stage. It is impact.
He's got enough of that.
And how many people is he impacting now because he allowed himself, he allowed himself to make the shift from I have to be the guy doing everything to I'm going to bring in a team that's going to help me take everything that I do to a whole nother level. And here's the thing. You said something interesting earlier, which is that your job isn't to do your work, to do the work. Your job is to own the outcome. And that's one thing. I mean, again, sticking with Tony for just a second here, Tony is all about the outcome.
So much so that every time I use the word outcome, my wife is like, really? We're saying outcome again? Yeah, no, it's interesting too, because the more you move into this zone, the vision gets bigger and wider. And when we were, so if we go back in time to those earlier days with Tony, he's like, oh, okay, how do we feed 1,000 people this Thanksgiving? Was like when I first came on, they were doing this big hunger drive deal for San Diego, and the big vision was, how do we feed 1,000 people? And I was like, man, that's freaking crazy. 1,000 people. Like, I don't know if anyone's ever been to a meal with 1,000 people there. I haven't. It's a lot of human beings. But
that is
rallying people, getting people engaged. And now every year around Thanksgiving, there's people all over the country that are going out and feeding people. But here's the key piece. Because he got more leverage and got more supports and got more entrepreneurial with his desire to feed people, because him growing up, he had a Thanksgiving where they didn't have food and somebody delivered it. And his father at the time shushed them away, because his ego wouldn't allow him to receive it. And Tony's like, I don't ever want to be in this position again, and I want to feed other people who are in need. Well, his vision right now is, how do we feed 1 billion people who are starving? So you go from 1,000 to 1 billion, but here's the crazy part. That happened over 20 years, not 20 lifetimes, but 20 years of kind of going, okay, how do we optimize this more? How do we improve this? How do we get better? How do we build a team around this? Who do we need to bring in the fold? That's the other who that's critical too, by the way. The more you get into this, it is 1,000,000% who do I need to be? Then the next question usually goes, well, who do I bring into the fold that can help me accelerate this bad boy? And that's where he's been really successful.
See, yes, that and here's the thing. We took this basically all the way into the higher levels of mastery here, and I want to dial it back for just a second, because initially, what I want you to remember is that if you want to make more impact, listen, if you're happy with just the job that you created for yourself, and that's good for you, then that's totally fine, and we have no judgment on that. But most of the people that we work with want more. They want more impact. They want to be able to do more. They want more freedom. They want to learn what the next level is going to look like for them, for their family, for their clients. Here's the truth. Yeah. Initially, it's not about getting to the level of mastery. It's just having the recognition that scaling your practice is not about abandoning your craft, or it's not about you don't get to do, any of the things that light you up anymore. It's deciding that more people deserve to access your gifts. And you make the decision in that moment, I am not going to be the bottleneck to that from today forward. And Tony made that decision a long time ago, and he's just gotten better and better and better at making it over time. It's an interesting thing, because going back to the concept of identity, after a while, at first you just make the decision. Okay, you know what? This is really uncomfortable. I'm a little, maybe it scares me a bit, but I'm going to do this, or I'm not going to do this, and I'm just going to see what happens. And then when you do it again, and you do it again, and you do it again, well, now this is who I am. Now it's like Tony doesn't have to think twice, about whether he's going to stick his nose into something where it doesn't belong at this stage of his, his business career.
He actually gets frustrated if he has to. It's the opposite.
Right. Exactly. Because that's his identity now. Right.
Yeah. Yep.
And I want to kind of make this tangible for a minute, where we talk about, like, okay, what is it? What are the concrete steps to actually sort of making this type of a decision and locking it up so that you can actually see these types of things come to fruition? And I think the first thing, you talked earlier about people who, one of the bigger mistakes is people thinking about, like, oh, how much do I charge per session, or, how much do I charge per hour, or whatever. And here's the thing. One of the first big shifts that you've got to make is you've got to stop thinking in hours. You've got to think in outcomes and decisions. So in your mind, when you make this shift from thinking in hours to outcomes and decisions, what is that? What comes to mind for you on that one?
So there's actually a few things in some different categories. The first is employees. They think 9 to 5, right? And I have a lunch hour and I have a break every 2.5 hours. And, I've got paid vacation time and I've got, my 401k, and they think in this world that has been presented to them. By the way, that world has been presented for a very specific reason. It gives people safety, or the perception of it. Security. Oh, come work with me. It'll be safer, right? And then we get handcuffed. So the first piece is when you step back and think outcome, if you took time out of the entire fold of this thing and you went, what's the outcome? Like, we move heaven and earth if we had to get to the outcome. Now, the moment you put, what's the outcome within 40 hours a week that fits to my schedule so that I don't have to tell my spouse that I've got to do something that's outside of that normal safety security bucket that everyone's used to, that changes the game. So the more rules that we put on this whole shooting match, the more challenging it becomes. So when we go in, the outcome is the outcome is the outcome, and we take ourselves out of time, what would you do to get there? So we would do the most highest and best use activities, and we would do them first. Doesn't usually mean the most fun things, but we would do the ones that would help us get the biggest amount of leverage to the outcome first.
I love this, and I want to double down on it. Like, I think taking the time, I'm going to just challenge you right now. You're listening to this. When you get done with this episode, I want you to take out your phone or grab a notepad or get on your computer, whatever you want to do. And I want you to list out all of the different things that you are doing right now. All of them. All the things. I want you to list them out in your business, and I want you to even go further and list them out in your personal life. All of the things that you are doing right now. And then I want to actually, and yes, this has a little bit of shock value, but I want you to look at all the things that you're doing across your personal life and your business right now, and I want you to ask yourself, which of these things is something that only I can do?
I'm going to need a bigger notepad.
So here's the thing. My guess is that you're going to have a shit ton on that list, and you might grab one or two out of that entire list that you put down. And here's the truth. Like, is there a process to get from, let's just say you write down 30 things, and you probably have more than that, honestly, but say you write down 30 things and you come up with two, like there's a process to get from 30 to 2, and it's not overnight. But whittling that down at bare minimum, now we can stop the story. Because this is the other thing, dude. A lot of this kind of stuff comes down to the story that we have around it. It's not truth. It's just the story. And we won't interrupt our own internal thought patterns to ask, well, is it true that only I can do this? Is it true that I have to be the one to blah, blah, blah? Is it true that I can't afford to hire someone? Most of the time, it's not. And so you got to examine the story around it as well and be willing to challenge the story. Because going back to your point, you put these rules in this construct around things, and we do this, by the way. We write stories that create rules and context around things and pretty much just put ourselves in our own fucking prison. And then we wonder why we can't get out. Well, that's why. So I would just say once you make your list and you got your couple of things, my next challenge would simply be like, okay, great. What are the things that beyond the shadow of a doubt, that you're doing that you don't need to be doing right now, that somebody else absolutely can handle? Maybe it takes you writing an SOP. Maybe it takes you recording a video. Maybe it's both, whatever. Maybe it takes a little hand holding. But start with the things that you don't like and are not a great use of your time, meaning that they do nothing to increase revenue in any way, shape, or form, and or they don't involve your very, unique expertise. And start with those. and just start chipping away at the list until you get it down to the point where you're really only doing the things that you need to be doing, because it brings back that old 80-20 rule idea of like, let's do the 20% of the things that actually move the needle and leave the 80% to other people.
Yeah, I want to double down on this one just because I think it's so critical. You know, mentioned Tony Robbins earlier and bringing some of these pieces in. So we've talked about our path to mastery. So you got startup, stability, success, and mastery. Okay, so startup, stability, success, and mastery. The reality is this: the things that got us to the point that we're at are usually 99% of the time the exact things that are keeping us from getting to that next level.
Ooh.
And that gets tough for us to swallow. And because here's the reality. We are conditioned, I'm going to say this one really slow, probably 10 times. We are conditioned creatures of habit. We are conditioned creatures of habit. Well, why? It goes back to the whole evolutionary component of safety and security. So we condition habits that make us feel safe because we think that if we do these things, that we're doing the right thing, that we're a responsible person, that if I do it long enough, it'll give me safety, security, or opportunity. And the reality is we get stuck in that loop. So we get the identity piece first, we then habitualize and we create these muscles that we condition. It gets us to a certain place. And then this is the worst part that can happen. I know you and I have talked about this before. If when we get rewarded for it, uh-oh.
Yep. Got that dopamine hit.
Yep. We get rewarded for it. And then we go, oh, I'm going to do that again and again and again and again and again. And so going back to this whole shooting match, if you really are committed to scale and grow, you have to be willing to let go of that security that you can do it better, or that you can do it faster, or that it takes less time to do it on your own versus handing it to somebody else. Of course it does. Because you've conditioned a neural pathway that's like the freaking Autobahn, and you can do things lickety-split.
Yep.
But if you're always the one doing things lickety-split, you'll always be the one doing things lickety-split, if that makes sense.
100%. I think you're spot on, man. And I think that the other part is like, I think there's an interesting nuance also to like when this happens, because people often ask like, okay, great, but how do I know if I'm even, let's say I want to do this, how do I even know if I'm ready to do this? And for me, I'm interested in your opinion on this, but for me, I look for first things first, like the very simple answer is become a total badass at what you do. If you're not there yet, if you're listening to this and you know you're not there yet, this is not for you yet. It will be, but it's not for you yet. To become a total badass at what you do. The one area that I would say it is for it, I'm going to go back on my statement just a little bit. If you're still trying to become a badass at what you do, I would still encourage you to try to have somebody who handles the things that you don't need to handle. You can absolutely start there right now, but it's not yet time. It's not a good idea to hand off something that isn't codified, that isn't a really great process, that doesn't get a great repeatable result for your clients to somebody else until it's there. You got to build that.
I want to double click on that one little piece real quick because I think it's critical. So you know this, but anyone listening doesn't know this. So I'm about to get on a plane today to go to San Diego. There's going to be a company of about 650 people. For 2 days, all we're going to do, use your word, is codify. Literally for 2 days, what we're going to be doing with them, each department is going to have to document their step-by-step process and procedure. Why? Because they want to grow. They want to scale. And it sounds so tedious and so boring and so mundane, but yet it's the cornerstone. It's the fundamental. They want to scale. So what do you scale? You have to scale a process. You have to scale a system. If you don't have a system documented, you ain't got nothing to scale. So to your part, you've got to be a badass at what you do, and you got to document it, because you can't improve upon something you don't know. If you don't know what it is, if you don't know what the process is, if you don't know what your system is, it's really, really tough to grow and scale it. So I just wanted to double click into that bad boy.
That is absolutely true. That's absolutely true. Well, and if you have gotten to that place where you've got it documented, you've got a process that works, like you get the right client and it's over, baby. You're like ready to go. Okay, great. Well, what if, here's my question to you today to just start opening this up. And by the way, this is a question that Brooke and I have been asking ourselves. Like, I've been pounding this one pretty hard lately because we're kind of at a bit of a tipping point in our own business. While we've extricated ourselves from some of the things, not all of them. And in order for us to grow, we got to do the same thing. So here's my question to you today. If someone had a gun to your head and it was literally life or death, and it was, you've got this thing that you do and you do it so well, and in order to live, or better yet, your family, in order for your family to live, you have to find a way for someone else to deliver on the process and the outcomes that you currently provide to your clients. What would you do? If you had to, what would you do?
It's interesting you just brought this question in the fold. So I don't know why this popped in my brain, but apparently the universe, God, is calling. So remember the book E-Myth?
Yeah.
So E-Myth, for anyone who's listening, if you haven't read E-Myth, I think maybe this is coming up. E-Myth was written long before AI had come into the fold. And I think it'd be really fascinating right now because with AI where it's at, and with getting virtual assistants, with building a team around you, with having the tools that are available, the software that's around us, with having those pieces that are there, like I just had like 15 things that just popped into my head, and I'm like, oh my God. So as soon as you posed that question, immediately the brain started rewiring. I'm like, oh, okay, time to do E-Myth again. But I want to go through E-Myth, like really having the lens of what is available to us now that could help us put those pieces in play. Because I know without question, I mean, you know me, this whole episode is like, oh, this is actually just an intervention for Brooke. I just got snuck into a podcast episode.
Allegedly, maybe.
I hear you, Ryan. I hear you, okay?
Oh my God. Oh, there might be a small amount of truth in that. For those of you that want to check this out, by the way, just so that you know exactly what we're talking about, it is The E-Myth. Michael Gerber wrote the book, The E-Myth. But yeah, I think that's the thing, is that we have to just be willing. Like, let's just play for a minute. And I encourage you to do this. Like, if you're listening to this and you're getting, like, your stomach's starting to knot up a little bit and you're getting a little tense and you're like, oh my gosh, what would I do? Get a little creative with this. Let's get playful and creative and just be willing to go, gosh, okay, well, if I had to, what would I do? And let it be messy at first. But here's the thing. I think that once you start down that road, you're going to recognize that what you're capable of building, this is the other key. I think that people short themselves on what they're capable of building. And so often this line about what people don't want, well, I don't want something that's that big. I don't need to have this, or I don't need to get to that level, or whatever. I think a lot of times it's just because you don't know what you're capable of. I think we short ourselves because we have a lack of belief of what we're capable of. And in some cases, it's simply because we haven't yet been able to, a lot of times with capability, we haven't been brought to the awareness that something is possible. I'm just telling you, once you start thinking down this line, whole kinds of shit becomes possible. And that is for you, that's for your family, that's for your clients, that's for the impact that you're making in the world with what you're doing. So, man, this was good stuff.
Yeah,
this was good
cool.
stuff.
My day just got torpedoed. Now I'm going to go make a whole list of all the things I shouldn't be doing, then beating myself up that I'm not doing those things, to go find somebody else to do those things so I don't have to do them anymore.
I just thought, look, you probably, you got a couple-hour plane ride today. Like, I'll just give you a little food for your plane ride, bro. That's all.
I'm gonna go make good usage of that time. Guarantee it.
All right. So last piece today before we leave you, if you want to understand a little bit more about where you're at right now in your business, because that's the other piece, is like you got to figure out where you are right now. and what's required to get from here to the next level. First of all, I'm just going to recommend that you go back and listen to those 4 episodes where we broke down each level of the Path to Mastery individually. But I'm also going to encourage you to go take the Path to Mastery quiz, because that's where you can find out where you're at with your business right now. And also, equally as important, what's the biggest constraint that's stopping you from getting where you are to the next level. You can do that. Just go to www.empirepartners.net/quiz. We'll also link it up in the show notes for you. My man, this was a fantastic episode. Great stuff today, brother. And thanks for accepting my intervention.
I'm going to go back and listen to this one a couple times. So necessary.
This is equally for me as well. So I commit to doing the same.
Love it, brother.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Path to Mastery podcast. Until next time, take care. Brooke, travel safely today, brother.
Take care, guys.